you can do, because we have multiple versions of your application, is you can create multiple deployments. We'll talk about deployments next. That means that you could run a test version of your application with your latest version, but still have your production deployment using an older, more stable release. Does that make sense? First test. Okay, so publication is getting your alpha application, your web application, pushed to the alpha cloud. Deployment is putting it to work. So the concept of a deployment now is a little bit different. We have that application, and we need to put it on a website with a specific path for the application. And then we want to assign a specific build of Alpha Anywhere application server. That means that every time you deploy your application on a specific website / application path, you can choose a version of your application and a build of Alpha Anywhere. Does that sound reasonably useful? Okay. If you change your deployment, deployments, by the way, are broken down into something called schedules. A schedule has a start and an end time. Start time might be for, now, and the end time might be forever. But you can also schedule your deployments in the future. And that means that if you don't want to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning when you change deployments, you don't have to. Personally, I would be, but you have the ability to schedule it and have it happen automatically. You don't have to be there to push the button. So there are a lot of different applications. As I said, you can have a test environment, a test deployment set up. You can test a new build of Alpha Anywhere. Occasionally we have something we call considerations for re-engineering. I think you refer to those as bugs. And you may want to, prove to us that it isn't you. You can also use a specific deployment to diagnose a problem in general. You may have an organizational group that wants a specific version of an application and you want to support that separately from another group. Or they could be customers that you're running on different levels of an Alpha Anywhere web application. And then finally, you might want to just bring up a demonstration version of your application to go show to one of your prospects. And these are all options without having to republish all of your versions. An area that's still definitely under serious development, and by the way, this is my little thing. When I do this, waving my hands, that means there's probably not a whole lot there yet. Okay? So, yes, application monitoring and cost management. What we're after here, though, we need for you to have a good view of your application as it's running on the cloud. You don't have the machine. You can't walk over to the box, log on, and start looking at what's going on. So we need to give you really good, solid user interface for developers, for operations, for management, and even accounting. Because you're tying up cloud resources, which means you're going to be paying a bill and you want to know what's going on. So we're absolutely focused on that right now. How about log files? Again, you can't go over to the machine and look at the logs. We're building, by the way, on the application server for IIS, so we're talking about IIS logging as well as XBasic logging. So we need to make that available to you as it is running on the cloud. And that's a little abstract, but as you see more of how the cloud works, that probably will make a lot more sense. So tools to analyze, export your data, your activity data, and then we want to make sure we've got good notification. If something goes wrong in your application, we need to let you know. The last area that we're working on is what I call database management. The interesting thing is, again, if you don't have control over the machine, it's out on the cloud, how is your database going to connect in? You're not going to put Microsoft Access on your PC and suddenly have the cloud connecting back to your PC. So we need to get your database out to the cloud. We've looked at some options. Ideally, we're looking for something called database as a service. And what that means is that you can define, manage, update, and back up and restore your database through the cloud interfaces. We also, at least initially, well, I wouldn't say at least, we will be supporting what I call bring your own database. As we are right now, we're running in the Amazon AWS environment, and they support something called Relational Database Services. This allows you to create Postgres, MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server databases, and you can manage them. Well, the bottom line is if you've built an Alpha application and you've connected to it via the SQL interface, you've created a connection string. And if you can create a connection string to connect to your database from the Amazon cloud, you're in business. Initially, we'll be working with you to set up those databases and make sure that we're working properly with them and you have a secure connection. Longer term, what we really want to do is not build, but partner with a good provider of database as a service, because this is a whole product in and of itself. Unfortunately, right now, even though you hear the term, this is a very immature product line. We're working with one company that's talked about making some changes to their product so that we can, possibly OEM it. But I think in general, it's a fairly immature market. So rather than invent our own, we're going to work with you and with partners to try and build something solid. Does that make sense? Anybody want us to reinvent databases? Oh, no, that's mine. I do this. You go. Okay, so does that make sense as in terms of what a cloud would offer you? Yes.
So in terms of migrating in and out, or migrating to the cloud hosting, or we want to move it to our own. Oh, sorry. Say I have a ZebraHost or a Amazon. I have an application hosted with a different provider. What is there going to be some wizard or some assistance with if we wanted to move it to the cloud?
What you're really talking about is moving your data, right? I mean, the application can be republished fairly easily.
Yeah, I guess it would be either
yeah.
moving it. If I have a database on a ZebraHost server now,
Then why would you want to move it?
No, it's a good question, but
Yeah, I think the key question, the question here is, I've got my system set up somewhere and I think Alpha Cloud's a great thing and I want to move my application to Alpha Cloud. How do I get my data there? Amazon has ways that you can move your data to relational database services. Over a certain size, they ask you to send them a disk, literally. In general, Amazon doesn't really charge you for data that you move onto their cloud. But if you want to move it out of their cloud, there's a reasonably good charge for doing that. So there are tools out there. There's a company called Attunity that's very good at moving data, and they can certainly move your data from one place to another. I think that's going to be one of the issues that we have to work carefully with you on. So your data right now is running on machines that ZebraHost is managing.
correct. Yeah, and it's and they're they're operating perfectly right now. Just throwing out a hypothetical if it.
Yep. And I am serious, by the way. There are options. Alpha Anywhere application server. You can put it on your own boxes. You can put it in your own data center. ZebraHost has a very good level of service and provides machines that are very reliable. Alpha Cloud is another option. So we're not discounting any other target. When it comes to deploying to Alpha Cloud, wherever your data is right now, you're going to have to move it. And I think I'm less concerned about the process of moving the data than I am about the integrity of the data and the consistency of the data and how you're going to back it up after that. So I think the operational part of it is what keeps me up at night. Data is just data. We can copy it. But that's something we're going to want to do really well.
Thank you.
Remote desktop into your part of Alpha Cloud?
Right. The question was, you wouldn't be able to remote desktop into your part of Alpha Cloud. The answer is right now, no. No, we're not setting up we can, and this will make more sense later on, so I'll come back to it and remind me. But no, we don't provide a virtual machine for you. Alpha Cloud is a little more abstract than that. We provide a runtime environment, and that gives us the ability to leverage some real efficiencies in terms of reusing machines and virtual machines and scaling as well, which hopefully that'll make sense, but hold me to it later. Well, here's a first look. This is not one of the parts where I have to do this. This is actual software. I prefer screenshots on PowerPoints to live demos that crash. So I don't think I'm going to crash here. If I do, it's going to be PowerPoint. The first thing that you will see that shows you Alpha Cloud and the Alpha development environment is going to be a new icon on the web control panel called Alpha Cloud. And off of that, you'll see that you have a myriad of options that will allow you to manage access to the Alpha Cloud and to publish your application as well. You'll also see on the publication targets that you have a new one called Alpha Cloud. And once you select that, you'll see a new dialog that allows you to provide a name for your application, and that simply associates your web project with an application on your Alpha Cloud account. You pick a name for your website, and then you provide a path. Remember, we're going to have a DNS name when we go to a website, and then possibly, usually, backslash, but it might be backslash accounting. So that's the path that gets us to your app. And then you have an option for publishing your security information. Now, for obvious reasons, in the short time that we have, I'm not going to drop down into gory detail here. Trust me that you have options for publishing your security information that include preserving what's there, merging in new groups, replacing your users, and we'll see some more complicated advanced options. I was joking with, I wouldn't say joking, but talking to Selwyn the other day about this one-button publish. Everybody loves one-button publish. There's no such thing. But if we can get you that close, this is pretty much enough to get you a running web application on the Alpha Cloud. This will get you started. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see that there's a, I don't know if you can read it, there's an http:// that whole path. That's enough to get you to your application on Alpha Cloud. Now, your mileage will vary. In testing, the fastest that we've ever published an application and then had it deploy, the deployment part of that application took 10 seconds. Okay? Like I say, your mileage will vary. But the reason is that we've built an environment that is up and running for the most part. Unless for some reason you need to bring up a new virtual machine, you can actually deploy an application just by putting your data out there. The entire system is data-driven. Obviously, there are a lot of defaults here because this would not be sufficient to publish your application in the most complex case. But I think that's fairly close to few button publish. We won't call it one button publish. And this is what you're going to see when you actually go ahead and publish your application. You go through the usual dialogues that set you up to publish, just as you do now, and then you'll see the progress as your data is moved to the cloud and then optionally deployed. So you can be publishing and deploying at the same time. You may decide you just want to publish it and then I'll work out my deployments. And it really depends on how complicated your environment is. Yeah, we can get more complicated. And we're not going to have time to talk about all of this. But what I do want to cover is get you an understanding of what it means to use Alpha Cloud as the owner of a subscription and as a, sorry, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. I can't see my own screen here. The joys of getting older. Every Alpha Cloud user works with something called a subscription. And within that subscription, you can have accounts. In the simplest cases, you have a subscription and you have an account that we create for you called Primary. Within that account, you can publish one or more applications. And then this advanced dialog gives you the option of saying, don't deploy it right now. Or, yes, I want to deploy it, and here's the deployment that I want to actually put out on the web. So far, so good? I know this is abstract, and one of the problems I'm having is I kind of have to go in a circle, in concentric circles that are growing to explain the concept. But hopefully by the time we're done, you'll have a pretty clear picture of what's being offered. Let's talk about a subscription. Subscription should be fairly familiar to you. That's what you purchase in the Alpha store. You're purchasing a subscription for Alpha Cloud. That subscription owns all the resources that you create. The websites, the deployments, SSL certificates, things like that. The subscription owner can delegate authorization for resources belonging to a subscription. So if you buy a subscription, congratulations, you are now the owner of a subscription. We talked about accounts and applications a little bit. An account is really just a way of keeping track from a billing standpoint and a control standpoint. So if you are working on behalf of any organization of any size, or if you have multiple customers that you're servicing, you may want to group your applications into accounts. You can also control access to those accounts, as I said. An application is really, if you think about it, it's a name for your web project as it lives on the cloud. Each publication, as I said before, creates a new version. And you can select which version you want to deploy. There's not a whole lot to an account or an application. As you can see, an account is just a name. You can never delete an account, as you might guess, because obviously we're going to want to bill for that account, but you can disable it. All right? And an account has a primary contact. Applications are pretty much the same. So there's not a whole lot to them. They're just names, and they help organize what you've pushed to the cloud. For the cloud, we recognize two key roles, and I think this is something that will make it interesting if you think of different scenarios for accessing and working on the cloud. The first is an Alpha Cloud user. Anyone can become an Alpha Cloud user. You simply register, provide an email, and I'll show a couple of those dialogues. And if you are granted permission, you can do all the things you need to on the cloud. You can create accounts, create applications, you can create websites, update SSL certificates, deploy applications, take them down. So all of that is available to a user. Now, keep in mind that an Alpha Cloud user has nothing to do with your deployed applications. If you're building a SaaS site and you've got users that belong to that SaaS site, they don't know anything about Alpha Cloud. So this is you as a developer or an operations person. The Alpha Cloud subscriber, as we said before, is the one who pays the bills. The subscriber is the one who owns that subscription and will automatically be associated with an Alpha Cloud user when the subscription is created. That owner can then delegate access to different parts of the Alpha Cloud. So again, before you can do anything with the Alpha Cloud, you can go in through Alpha Anywhere, through the development environment, and you can register as a user of the Alpha Cloud. Once you do, we'll send you an email with a token in it, ask you to bring that token back to Alpha Anywhere to show that you own that email account or you're in control of that email account. And then we'll let you set a password using that token. At which point, congratulations, you're part of the Alpha Cloud community, you're a user, you can't do anything, but you're an Alpha Cloud user. Once you log in as an Alpha Cloud user, we will go figure out what you are authorized to do, which subscriptions you've been authorized to access, maybe because you own them or because someone else authorized you to work on them, and which accounts within those subscriptions you're authorized to work on. Now, if you don't want any of this complexity, you want to buy your subscription, you want to publish your one application to the cloud, you won't have to do any of this. We'll default everything for you. You'll have your subscription and you'll have a primary account. But if you've got a more complex environment, we want to make that fairly easy too. So once you have your Alpha Cloud user, a subscription is set up, you're authorized to access that Alpha Cloud subscription. If you're the owner, you can begin to make changes, or you're authorized as a primary contact for a subscription. Okay. Does this all make sense in a complicated sort of way? Yes?
Sorry to hog another question.
Yeah, you get 3, by the way. So you
So I have a project where Sonic Wall net extender is installed on the server, and you know that enables the connection to the SQL Server database that's sitting on the client's other server. Is Alpha Cloud, would Alpha Cloud be able to accommodate that kind of a scenario?
you might have to go through. A question was Sonic Wall.
Yeah, Sonic Wall.
It's an agent that's installed on the machine.
It's an agent installed on the machine, correct?
Yeah,
allowing the connection to the server where the database is housed.
Yeah, we'd have to talk about that. I think that would be a special case. Initially, we're gonna keep it real simple. Whether that would go through some kind of a proxy, I can't say off the top of my head, but yeah. I mean, these are the kinds of things. Initially, the answer will make more sense later. You can, in fact, have a machine dedicated, and in those cases, we'll definitely look at what we can do to accommodate custom software on there. If you're not working on a dedicated machine, in other words, other people have applications that are on that machine, we'll talk about that, we probably won't be as generous in letting you put software on the machine. Does that make sense? Okay, so how does all this work? Well, what happens is all of the objects that are in our definitional database have authorizations associated with them, usually a primary contact. But you can also add someone. I generously added Selwyn as an authorized maintainer to this particular account called Development at Alpha. Seems like a reasonable thing to do. So if you look on the right side of this slide, you'll see the other screen shows you the effective access. So you can look at an object from the development environment and see who's authorized to access that. And you can manage that. So we've put a reasonable amount of effort into controlling access to those resources on the cloud. Before you really can go out and publish using your own domain name, you're going to have a website. So initially we'll create a website for you. We'll set up the DNS records. You can go out and you can use it right away, but it will be a little bit long and ugly. So through accessing your website that you gave a name to, you remember that first screen many slides ago, you'll be able to associate your host name. So you'll have to go off to your DNS provider, create a CNAME record that points to our DNS name. So you give us the host name, and we will then recognize it inside of the running website. And then if you have an SSL certificate, which you will need, you will upload that certificate, and I highly recommend that you not get involved in wildcard certificates, that you create a certificate that's dedicated to this host. Let's not have any possibility that you have the same certificate used internally at your site and on Alpha Cloud. Does that make sense? So you upload your certificate, you provide the host name, and we'll take it from there. And we can provide now that your DNS name maps through a CNAME to the Alpha Cloud website that you deploy. Now, the interesting part on this slide happens on the right. And this will start to make it feel, I think, like a cloud. After we get past the certificate, you notice there's something called geographic region. And to the right of that is tenancy, and then finally server group. By selecting US East, your website will be deployed in Amazon AWS Virginia. If you want to pick Australia, we'll deploy in Australia. If you want to pick Europe, we'll deploy in Europe. Make sense? So we're building on top of Amazon at this stage, which means you get what we get, which is all of their data centers around the world. We have the concept of tenancy. Now, don't confuse this with SaaS tenancy. We're not talking about your application and your customers. What we're talking about is your website running on a virtual machine at Amazon. So you have essentially three levels. Public, which has some advantages and disadvantages. Public means we're going to find a running virtual machine in the Alpha Cloud to put that website on, and we're going to deploy your website potentially with other websites on the same machine. Now, obviously, we're going to take advantage of things like application pool identities, keep ACLs set up so that other websites on that machine can't get at your data and your published pages. But you are in a public environment. What's the advantage? Well, we can put a whole bunch of websites on a machine and cut the cost dramatically. So that's the I'm putting a demo together. I don't want to spend a lot of money for a machine. How about I just put it on the public tenancy option? Then you have shared, which is actually fairly sophisticated. You can have any number of your own applications grouped together, and that's what we mean by server group, by name. So you can have all of your production applications, all of your test applications, or even all of your applications for a particular customer, using that as your server group, share virtual machines, but not have access by anyone else. So you can group a bunch of your websites into a server group and then have those websites share virtual machines, but nobody else gets access to them. Or you can go to the extreme and say, look, money is no option, is no object. I want every machine to myself. And that's what we call single tenancy. Does that make sense? Yes? No?
So even the single tenancy would be virtual machines?
Even the single tenancy would be potentially a group of virtual machines. We'll get back to that. I'm going to. Okay. Uploading certificates, as you can imagine, we've tried to make that as easy as possible, but no easier. And how many of you actually have requested a certificate for SSL before? How many of you had a wonderful experience and would like to do it again? Okay. Yeah, we really can't fix all of that, but we want to at least make it easy to get the thing set up and installed in the cloud. I mentioned deployments. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them, but a deployment is essentially a way of saying, I'm putting the application somewhere, and it's going to go on this website in this path, and I'll figure out when I actually deploy it, and you'll see these lines down at the bottom, which build of Alpha Anywhere I want, which version of my application I want. And this is where you'd go to roll forward and roll back. All right, so when you want to install a new version of your application on a deployment, you simply add a new scheduled deployment, and we take it from there. Not too painful? All right, let's take a look at the ecosystem, just to give you a sense of what are the pieces. Obviously, and in red, the Alpha Anywhere development environment is where you're going to spend your time. We'll also be working in the upper left-hand corner on better interfaces that are not necessarily inside of Alpha Anywhere to let you see what's going on with your cloud application. in general, the upper right-hand corner, you see Cloud Management Database. That's our stuff. That's our data that tells us what you're trying to do. Your websites, your deployments, and permissions that you associate with cloud resources like websites, accounts, applications, deployments. And we'll keep track of that. The Alpha Anywhere development environment has a ton of dialogues. You saw that list on the first slide to allow you to go in and manage each of the pieces. Then there's an environment manager that's responsible for making sure, as they used to say in what was it, Star Trek: The Next Generation, make it so. That's all this piece of code does. It makes sure that what you've asked for is what the Alpha Cloud actually looks like. Again, I've shown the database is kind of detached. I would love to provide a really solid implementation of an OEM database as a service, but I want to be realistic about where we are on that. So your application, when it gets published, just to be clear, your application gets published from the Alpha Anywhere development environment to the cloud. We're very careful about your assets. The data is encrypted in transit, moving it to the cloud to a temporary storage area. Then we decrypt it, throw away the key we used, and move it to permanent storage as an application version and encrypt it at rest there. All right? So nobody is going to get at your assets on the cloud. When it's time to deploy, we'll take that application and the security information, merge them together, and build an IIS environment, which involves constructing a web config file for IIS. And we call that a deployment. Each machine in the Alpha Anywhere or the Alpha Cloud environment knows how to configure it itself. And it's got a piece of software on it that will actually manage the deployment to that machine. So as a result, we don't have some big master controller out there that's keeping tabs on all these different machines. Once we start a machine up, it knows what it is, who it is, so to speak, and it can go get the pieces and check for changes. So that means that performance is really not going to be an issue. Each machine will be able to manage itself. So far, so good? How are we doing for time, Dave? Okay, I think we're doing okay. Just to give you an idea what goes on here, we'll take the information in your database, we'll generate the configuration, and then we'll also keep track of changes. And each, as I said, each instance of a machine running in the cloud, we'll check to see if anything's changed, pull down changes, install the Alpha Anywhere versions it needs, install up changes to your application, which we're calling deployments here, and get them running. And that's one of the reasons it can happen very fast. At the same time, because it's happening in a distributed fashion and there's no master controller, you could have 5 or 6 machines, virtual machines, that are actually running your website, and they update concurrently. Not in parallel, but concurrently. Okay. So what does this cloud look like? Well, this is a very simple diagram. But what we do in the Amazon environment, how many of you worked with Amazon AWS, by the way? Isn't it fun? If you like routers and firewalls, you're going to love security groups and the rules for those. So what you do is you go to their console and you start up an instance or an auto-scaling group. Well, you didn't used to be able to start an auto-scaling group from the console. You can now. And then you'd set up all of your security groups to make sure that your instances can talk to the databases and so forth. And that probably would take you a couple hours, and then you'd spend the rest of the day figuring out what you screwed up. So I think one of the key values that Alpha Cloud is offering here is we're not inventing infrastructure. We're building on other people's infrastructure. In this case, Amazon. I'll talk about why it doesn't have to be Amazon. What we do in the Amazon environment is we create what's called an auto-scaling group. We're not starting up a virtual machine. We're starting a collection of virtual machines that Amazon will automatically scale up or down depending on metrics that we set. And I don't have a slide that shows it here, but you can actually say, you know, if I've got my own machine for my application and nobody else no other customers are on that, I'm going to tell you if the CPU is more than 60% loaded for 2 hours, start up another machine. Or maybe you're a little more patient. If it's 90% for 4 hours, start up another machine. And those rules will be passed to the Amazon auto-scaling engine, and it will take it from there. It's really kind of cool to watch Amazon handle the scaling. What it also does, though, is it handles availability. So we've set up our auto-scaling groups so that they cross what are called availability zones. Amazon has regions. Within regions, they have data centers that they call availability zones. So for instance, in Virginia, it's not a data center. There are actually 4 of them. And we will scale across 3 of them, meaning that we could actually have a machine running in one data center, a virtual machine, running in another data center, and if one of those data centers goes down, the other one picks up the load. So auto-scaling is a really nice facility that guarantees that your application will be available through a software load balancer that's part of this configuration. Okay, how many of you are, yeah, I get it, and how many of you are like, what the heck is he talking about? A few of those. Okay, so this is this is new and different. If you're used to setting up a physical machine or 2 machines and maybe installing a load balancer, that's a different experience. This is all handled for you automatically in the Alpha Cloud environment. All right, so we're running on Amazon. It's proven to be the 800-pound gorilla in the business of infrastructure as a service. And I think we're getting some pretty good results. So keep in mind that when your application is deployed, it's going to be part of what we call a server group. That server group may be 1 or more virtual machines. If you have that public tenancy we talked about, we'll pick the machine it runs on. If you have shared, we'll take all the websites you have that are in the same server group and we'll put them on 1 or more machines. Right? And if you say, I want my own single tenancy, we'll put everything into one. The last thing to be clear about with Alpha Cloud is that we're building because we're building in a way that shows that we expect things to change. Any of you heard of OpenStack? We're watching it. OpenStack seems really great. It's immature, but it's actually got a development velocity that is going up very quickly. So as they get better, we're going to keep an eye on them. Everything you see in blue here is agnostic as to what cloud it's running on. All those dialogues, you notice none of them said, I'm running on Amazon. The part that's on the right is the code that knows about Amazon AWS. It knows how to take that server group and put it on virtual machines and auto-scaling groups and all that stuff. So we're going to keep an eye on the technology as it changes. All right, back to the beginning. So we've got publication, deployment. We're working on the monitoring and the cost management. We want you to know what your applications are costing you. And we're actually looking at some fairly fine-grained metrics, including what's my page costing me? So you can begin to look at the performance of your applications, not only on the cloud, but when you're running under IaaS and potentially under the XBasic application server. It's important to know where your performance bottlenecks are. Database management, not so clear, a little cloudy, sorry, but we're moving forward.